If you just bought a road bike, you could be forgiven for wondering where on earth your gear shifters are. Now, until about 1990, they were pretty obvious. They were located here on the down tube and they were enormous levers. But then they became seamlessly integrated into your brakes. So in this video, we are going to go right back to basics and explain how you actually use them. Broadly speaking, there are three main manufacturers of gears, and with only one exception across all the models, your left gear shifter here controls the gears at the front, so the big jumps between your chain rings, whereas the gear shifter in your right hand controls the smaller jumps at the cassette at the back. SRAM gears are different once again, and that's because they only have one shift lever on each side, and they can do that because they invented something called double tap. So to click into a smaller sprocket or a smaller chain ring, you push the lever until it clicks. However, if you want to change into a bigger chainring or a bigger sprocket, you push the lever through the click and then keep going until it clicks again, which will do the opposite of the single click. And you also, on the right hand shifter, have the ability to multi-shift at the back, simply by keeping on pushing until you change 3 gears. This is the Shimano STI. STI standing for Shimano Total Integration, as opposed to any kind of transmitted infection. Now, with most STIs, Shimano ones anyway, the whole brake lever will move in order to shift a gear, and then inside it there is another lever that will shift the gears in the opposite directions. So with the big lever, you will be changing into a larger sprocket or a larger chainring, depending on whether you're using your right hand shifter or your left hand shifter. Then the smaller lever changes into smaller sprockets and smaller chainrings. However, there is a slight complication, and that is that moving into smaller chainrings at the front makes the gears easier, but yet moving into smaller rings at the back makes gears harder. I know, I'm sorry about that. So, small rings at the front means easier gears, small rings at the back means harder gears. Now, to try and simplify things a little bit, if you were imagining that you were coming up to a big hill, if you click down with the small lever with your left hand, you will be moving into an easy gear at the front, and then you move the whole shifter across with your right hand, you'll be moving into an easy gear at the back. However, if you then come to a large downhill and you start pedaling too fast, you will want to do the opposite. So you move the whole shifter across with your left hand and then click down with the small lever on your right hand. Now, there are 2 exceptions with Shimano gears. The firstly is for Di2, which is more expensive and will gloss straight over. But the second is with the less expensive levers. You will find that to shift into a smaller sprocket or smaller chainring, there is a lever located on the inside of the shifter here, where you rest your hands, which is much like the Campagnolo shifters, which funnily enough, we'll move on to next. Campagnolo are an Italian brand, and their levers are called Ergo Power. Unlike Shimano, the brake lever itself does not move. Although they still have the lever on the inside, that now does the opposite. So you press that lever and you will move into bigger sprockets and bigger chainrings. And then to shift into smaller ones, they have that lever located on the inside of the shifter there that you operate with your thumb. So smaller gears, bigger rings. Smaller rings, bigger rings. Now, like Shimano, you have the ability to multi-shift up, so that lever has several clicks on it. But unlike Shimano, you have the ability to multi-shift down into smaller rings, like so. With all the systems that we talked about here today, you are actually able to simultaneously shift both your front chainrings and your rear sprockets at the same time. But you will find that most of your gear changing will be done using the rear sprocket, so your right hand, making those small incremental changes. But there is one thing that you should look out for, and that's called cross-chaining, which is where you use extreme gear ratios. So for example, the biggest sprocket at the back and the biggest chainring at the front, or the smallest sprocket and the smallest chainring. And you should avoid it for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's mechanically less efficient, so it's detrimental to you, but then also it can actually prematurely wear your gears. So then I guess it's detrimental ultimately to your wallet. So in order to watch out for it, you'll find that as you are in the big chainring and you start to move up the gears at the back, when you get towards the top of the cassette, you want to shift into that smaller chainring. And then vice versa, when you're in the small cogs and the small chainring, make sure you remember to shift into your big chainring. Now, if you want to know a little bit more in depth about how you should use your gears, like a pro in fact, or a wily old pro in this case, then you can watch a video on exactly that subject just up there. or to see how to index your gears, so effectively make them work properly, then click just down there for that maintenance video. Otherwise, make sure you subscribe to GCN before leaving this one. To do that, just click on the globe. If you just bought a road bike, you could be forgiven for wondering where on earth your gear shifters are. Now, until about 1990, they were pretty obvious. They were located here on the down tube and they were enormous levers. But then they became seamlessly integrated into your brakes. So in this video, we are going to go right back to basics and explain how you actually use them. Broadly speaking, there are three main manufacturers of gears, and with only one exception, across all the models, your left gear shifter here controls the gears at the